Hey everyone, happy July 4th. Let freedom ring. Freedom. You're watching TechStrong Gang. Hi everyone, it's Alan Schimmel here for TechStrong Gang. Hey, day before July 4th, it's our last show of the week. We won't be on tomorrow as we celebrate freedom in its many forms. And, you know, freedom could be like a Jonathan Livingston Seagull thing. If you let it go and it comes back to you, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was. And it's not something, you know, for many of us, we've taken it for granted living in, let's call them Western democracies. Personal freedoms and freedoms to do many things. And, you know, this is a year where I think we need to reflect and say, what's that freedom worth to me, right? Am I willing to give up freedoms? But anyway, we'll talk more about it. We've got that and more. We've got some healthcare, cyber news on here and some GitOps news and more. We've got a great panel to talk to you about it with. Let me introduce you. They've been on before, so you know these folks. Out west, we've got the czar of the valley, John Swartz. Up in Canada, our Canadian DevOps leader, Garima Bajpai, though she's based in Canada, to be fair, Garima is a worldwide DevOps leader, actually a big CD Foundation leader as well. And then, of course, we have the dean in New York, Mike Vizard. Welcome, welcome, guys. So, Mike, it's another July 4th. It's rainy. It's supposed to rain down here. I was kind of bummed out. I wanted to go see some fireworks tomorrow night. But really, July 4th isn't just about the fireworks. Is it?
Well, I hope not. There's more to it. But, you know, it's interesting. You have this essay that's on techstrong.ai, and I encourage everybody to go read it. And at least I feel like we're kind of on the cusp here of having to re-examine the social contract by which we all kind of live. And some of the question is to what degree is AI going to just be something we turn loose, or do we need to come to terms with some way to kind of reconcile or manage this thing in a way that respects everybody else's rights? And what's the definition of that? And John, of course, has had a piece talking about how there was an effort to limit the state's ability to regulate AI that was abandoned in this recent big, beautiful bill at the last moment. But Alan, you know, walk us through your reasoning here.
Sure. So you mentioned the social contract, Mike, and there is, right? If I was a political science history major, and you know, we learned a lot about Rousseau and Locke and Voltaire and some of the other philosophers that our founding fathers here in the U.S. kind of looked at, Montesquieu, in how they fashioned our social contract, right? We have some principles in the U.S. that, well, we had some principles in the U.S. Things like your rights end at the tip of my nose, right? You can do what you want as long as it doesn't infringe on my rights. Things like better 10 guilty men go free than one innocent man goes to jail. Personal freedoms. Freedoms around economics, around, you know, one of the great things about the United States and quite frankly, you know, modern Western civilization is economic mobility. We had created more middle-class people than the world's ever seen. But every you know, there are boundary points and there are forks in the road that we come to, and some bigger than others. And it seems like AI is one of these things that has the potential to be bigger. The internet, certainly as big as anything since the internet, because when you think about it, the internet has wrought all kinds of change to our freedoms in good and bad ways. We all thought it was great that everybody can have a soapbox to go off and talk about and give their opinions. but we forgot that opinions are opinions and facts are facts. And we're still dealing with the repercussions of that. Now, AI promises to have maybe even a bigger effect than the internet on what we do, how we do it, on our freedoms. Oh, they always say about Singapore, for instance, Singapore has had great stability, security, prosperity, and they probably have traded off some personal freedoms. And the people were okay with that. It was their social contract. Places like China, where we have less personal freedoms, perhaps, right? And the government is more involved in our day-to-day activities. But, we're past the point of pointing to China as the bad example, and we're somehow that shining city on the hill that Ronald Reagan spoke about. Well, I don't know if that city is quite as shiny when it comes to talking about our freedoms. And AI has the potential to make it a lot less shiny. But here's the beauty of it. AI also has the potential to make it brilliantly shiny. Things it could do to equal the playing field, to give everyone an opportunity, to bring more, to do more, is there. I think it's up to us, and not our government, us, each one of you watching this. It's up to us to figure out what's the right use for AI, how do we all leverage AI, what can we do to make AI make our lives better, not take our jobs away, not increase the police state. We've spoken about many of these topics over the last couple of weeks and months. But what can we do to make our lives better using AI to let freedom ring? And that's really the point of my essay that I wrote. I do encourage you to watch it. But I think this is going to be a pivotal year, a year to 3 years, where we got to figure this out. Because it could go either way, right? I feel like we're at midfield and I'm flipping the coin, and John, you could call heads or tails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're early. We're early in the narrative about AI. And this one thing about this technology that I haven't really seen from many others is how polarizing it can be. Like, there are stark opinions or points of view, whether it can be incredibly good or incredibly bad. I think, like everything else, it will end up a mixture of both. And I think for the most part, it's going to be positive. I think our healthcare will be better. Transportation is going to get better. Content democratization of certain people and things. But always the issue, I think, with this, as well as with the internet and previous technologies, is that people need to be responsible in their use of it. And I think as we've seen, they try to figure out a way or an in on profiting from it, whether through illegal activities or just the land barons that we have right now. So it's going to develop. I think you're right, Alan. I think the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to really have a good definition of how this works within our homes or our workplaces. I think it's going to be predominantly a positive experience, but right now we're kind of in the boogeyman phase, where it can do so many things badly, or it can do so many things incredibly well. So we'll see.
Is this going to be a social contract that we all agree to, or am I someday just going to go up on some website somewhere and train a bunch of AI agents to defend my inalienable rights at the expense of everybody else, and everybody else will do the same, and then we'll just fight it out on the web or in the ether somewhere?
That's a good point. I think we kind of do that right now. And I think social media ramped that up, so we're already accustomed to it. Maybe it intensifies with AI, and that's kind of terrifying, because I think of what you could do with AI much farther beyond anything that you could do with the internet or Facebook or X or what have you. I think of deep fakes. I think of like these influences, not just in our personal lives, but at our own personal expense in terms of scams. It's going to be like a Wild West, yeah. And I think we're going to probably need some sort of regulation, which kind of brings me to the Big Beautiful Bill Act, which would have basically done away with any type of state laws or state regulation for a decade. Thank God that went by the wayside. I mean, ironically, even the most conservative Republicans like Marsha Blackburn wouldn't stand for it. Even Ted Cruz of all people. But you're right, Mike. I mean, this is a danger we are going to face, and it will happen. It's just the extent of what's going to happen and how farther it perhaps divides us or brings us together.
Mike, you mentioned inalienable rights. And we take for granted what we think those inalienable rights, right? Our Creator has endowed us with inalienable rights, among them, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think I got that just about right. I think we're at a point where we've got to decide, really, what are those inalienable rights? I mean, if I could be stopped by some masked men in the street who claim to be, and maybe are in fact, federal agents, but don't have any ID, refuse to give you ID, and they've got masks and guns. Well, I thought we had inalienable rights around that, right? We have a Bill of Rights, illegal search and seizures, stuff like this, habeas corpus, things that our system has been built on. If we're going to start trading those or cheapening those and let AI infringe on those inalienable rights, well, then they're not inalienable anymore, right? And that's the key. Johnny, your point about the big, beautiful bill, I'll point out it's not quite signed yet and it's not quite done. It was kicked back to the House. We don't know if this is going to stay in or not. But here's the thing about it. What it really was is it precluded the individual states from doing anything on AI, right? It carved out for the federal government, and under the current administration, federal government, that could be, again, back to inalienable rights. That could be a scary thing. Now, there's a little bit more history, though. It wasn't as clean as just, we're going to take it out. Initially, the Senate said, well, this is a little too crazy, just a flat-out carving out of no state action for 10 years. So the initial version of the bill said, well, no, the states can legislate around AI, but if they do, they forfeit their rights to this $500 billion, let me say it again, $500 billion pot of money that if you're going to use it for broadband or AI, you forfeit your right to that $500 billion if you're going to legislate around AI, which was, I guess, a little better than just flat out prohibiting them from doing it, right? A little bit more of a carrot than a stick. And traditionally states like Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, they don't care about the money. They don't spend it on that anyway. But even as you say, John, Marsha Blackburn, who I don't think I've ever agreed with one thing she's ever said publicly, spoke up and said, wait a second, here's what she really said on the floor of the Senate. The federal government has a terrible record of legislating this stuff. Where is the real action taking place? At the state level. It's the states who are consistently here in the U.S., because we don't have the political will nationally to get things done. It's the states who've come out with cybersecurity regulations, privacy regulations, trying to draw the line on where our inalienable rights cannot be trampled on. And to prohibit them from doing it because we think somehow the federal government's going to do it is really having no AI legislation at all. And we need to keep the states involved. Now, whether the House will buy that or not, John, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, because of when we're filming this, it's probably going to happen. It happened or didn't happen on Wednesday, well, who knows? But the interesting thing about Blackburn, you're right, Alan, I have exactly the same opinion. I probably don't agree with her on 99% of what her thoughts are, but I have interviewed her and I found her actually to be a voice of reason in terms of what the federal government doesn't do, because the federal government has been absolutely hopeless including anything like online privacy, AI related legislation.
I think it'll be
It hasn't done anything in
laissez-faire.
20 years. I mean,
Yeah.
25, COPA was like the last major or only significant related technology regulation they've done involving privacy or the internet. So, it's good. It's interesting. It's really very weird bipartisan viewpoints from extremely liberal, extremely conservative folks tend to be in agreement on some of these things. So it's really hard to pin down. But, the influence too of Sam Altman, and, he testified in May about this, about regulation of AI. And he made a very strong argument against it, obviously, because his company is part of Stargate, the $500 billion AI infrastructure movement, which is kind of plodding along. That scares me. That's actually what scares me, the influence of some of these folks, especially in the tech side, and their influence on government in the Trump administration.
So
You guys realize the rest of the world is kind of looking at this whole conversation and scratching its head, because in places like Canada, for instance, the assumption is that if the authority is not expressly given to the provinces, it resides in the hands of the federal government. Whereas we're the only country that has the opposite of that, and everybody else around the world is going, "What are you guys debating?"
But here's the thing, and Garima, you may or may not be up on it, I don't know. Canada's actually already enunciating some regulation around AI and so forth.
I will
Privacy.
provide a technologist view on this because, from a technology standpoint, I see there is a rise in a new role or a new era for tech diplomacy, because a lot of these issues are kind of, related to the demography, the people sentiment, and the tech diplomacy is needed in certain aspects to ensure that there is a balance in how innovation can drive, your healthcare forward, your digital infrastructure forward, but at the same time does not hurt, the community sentiments, protect the rights, the privacy rights, build in data ethics and the framework. So I think there's a lot needs to be done before we enforce these policies and decisions around a wider or broader community. So from a tech perspective, I believe that there is a lot of tech diplomacy needed in this. And even in Canada, we have different provinces, different needs of digital infrastructure. So I mean, there's no straightforward answer to this, but yes, again, the question is, when you talk about democratization, who is accountable, when something goes bad, right?
Yep.
So that's a question to be answered.
And of course, the EU's out ahead on this, right? The EU's already spoken and acting on it. But to your point, Mike and John, about the $500 billion project, what's it? Spotlight, Searchlight, Stargate SG1, right? Stargate. What's interesting here, right? It recently came out. Nothing's been done with Stargate yet. And nothing's been done. In typical fashion of the administration, we had Bright Lights Big City press conference, made all kinds of announcements. Nothing's been done. All of these pledges and everything else sound great. In the meantime, the government's going to put a $500 billion fund into AI. So $500 billion of government money perhaps going in there. Let's not lose sight that this big, beautiful bill conservatively adds $3.5 trillion to our already high deficit. $3.5 trillion to the deficit. That will bring our debt to like 125% of our GDP. And it's done on the backs of taking out money from people's Medicaid and college financing and other things to give billionaires and millionaires great tax credits so they can invest in AI and things like this. Guys, we got to end this segment, but I'm going to end it with this. It's July 4th. People died and fought for your freedom. Don't stand by and let them take your freedoms away from you. That's all I'm going to say on it. We're going to take a break. We'll be back. You're watching Tech Strong Gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey, folks, we're back and we're continuing this conversation about politics and, well, also adding a little criminal element to it as well. So the DOJ has charged 324 individuals with a $14.6 billion healthcare fraud scam. It's been going on for a while and involved all kinds of folks from nurses to doctors to, full-blown criminals. And John, I got to tell you, here's the thing that drives me crazy about this. We at the same time are talking about this big, beautiful bill that is cutting out billions of dollars of aid for Medicaid and Medicare for the poorest. And yet we have $14.6 billion going out the back door somewhere. And I'm sure there's more of this. And I don't really mean to see and sound like, I'm anti-government, but this is crazy. I mean, for all the Doge investment and for all the stuff that we've been doing, can we just figure out how to maybe contain the fraud so that we have enough money to support the people we need to support?
Yeah. I'm afraid that we're going to probably see more of this. Because, as we all know, when a new technology comes along or something that is existing is amplified, like the internet under AI, we're going to see a lot of bad guys take advantage of the system. And here they definitely did. There was this absolutely complex fraudulent schemes where these foreign operators, I think nearly 30 people in Estonia and Pakistan were part of this. This transnational criminal organizations were accused of buying medical supply companies to which they filed false claims. One of the things that jumped out at me, and it kind of refers to our first segment, was that executives with marketing companies in Pakistan had allegedly used deepfake technology to create these fake recordings of Medicare patients who apparently were agreeing to receive certain healthcare products and then filing false claims. So there's a use, again, of AI. At the same time, our government doesn't want us to do anything about that for now. Again, as you said, Mike, criminals, the bad guys, really do take advantage of technology because they, in a sense, are like the pioneers in its use in many ways. And then we try to counteract what they do. And the great irony, as you said, is Doge was all about efficiency, government, getting rid of waste. Yet here we're seeing this incredible amount of waste that of all things involves Medicare at a time when we're talking about cutting those benefits for folks as part of a big, beautiful bill. So it's all kind of a crazy world, but it's not entirely surprising. And my fear is that healthcare, which I think has the most potential in terms of AI use, will also be a target. So it's going to greatly benefit us down the road in terms of how we look at healthcare through AI, but we're also going to probably encounter more schemes and scams and potential dangers to our not just our health, but our pocketbook.
Yeah. I'll jump in if it's okay.
By all means, I have more to say, but go ahead.
How many people out of these 324 are going to serve in Congress or the Senate one day? Because we've got our fair share serving right now who have been implicated, or their companies have been implicated, convicted, and had to pay for Medicare fraud. Medicare fraud seems to be rampant. This is the latest. It is a big one, $14.5 billion. But, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But, for all the noise about Doge and everything and all these, big cost cutters, it seems like, some work needs to be done in that system. We got to design a better mousetrap.
Yeah, and that comes back to my next point, which I know we have this notion in the land of cybersecurity that we don't blame the victim. But you know what? I think in this case, there's some folks who work for these agencies that need to get fired. It's clearly somebody's asleep at the wheel. And at this tune of 14 billion plus God knows how much else is going out there, it's broken. So we need to kind of like really have a conversation, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican. This system is fundamentally broken, needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. And maybe we need a commission to go do that. That's bipartisan, and this is all they do.
We don't do bipartisan commissions anymore. That's an issue.
I think occasionally we can come up with an issue that maybe we can all agree on, that this is just insane.
Well, the problem is you're going to get one group that says the whole thing's broken, scrap it. You're going to get another group that says, well, we can't scrap it because it's mission critical, people's lives depend on it. And there's got to be a middle ground where, no, you're not going to scrap it, but you're going to make it. This is the kind of thing, and I'm a child of my times, right? I get this. But this is exactly the kind of thing where Bill Clinton would take Al Gore, and Al Gore would lead that bipartisan commission, and they'd come up, maybe it'd take 18 months, and it wouldn't be on the headlines every day, but they'd come up with a plan for Medicare 2. Or whatever you want to call it, that would do things like this, right? We don't have those. Lyndon Johnson was given a charter to build a space program, and we wound up in the moon in 8 years, not because it's easy, but because it's hard, right? Clinton gave Gore to reinvent government, and for the first time and the only time in my lifetime, we actually ran budget surpluses. When was the last time we did anything like that? That's what's needed here.
And it's hurting folks in these red states more than it does the blue states, where it's pretty clear that a lot of those folks are more dependent upon these services.
This isn't a red or blue issue. The fact that it's wrought with, potential for fraud is, I don't think anyone argues. I think the question is that a reason not to do it altogether? Or what do you do to fix it? What do you do to fix it? I mean, look, let's face it, we're the last industrialized country that doesn't have socialized medicine anyway. And all these other countries figure out a way to do it. And in spite of what the media may tell you, they do it well. They do it well. We can't figure it out, and we get this craziness.
I mean, people complain about those services in Europe all the time, but
they complain about our services too. But at the end of the day, the standard of healthcare in Europe and Canada and other places where they have socialized medicine is pretty damn good. The last time I was in Singapore, I cracked a tooth and I had to get a root canal. Some of the best dental care, best equipment I ever had. I think it cost me, $65. Probably cost me $1,000 or more here, right?
That's with insurance, right?
With insurance, exactly. That's with my insurance. So, this nonsense that people complain, everybody complains. Everybody, that's the nature of that beast. But I'm telling you that there's got to be a better way.
I think it's on like the whole climate too. Is like we used to have a lot of bipartisan bills, like you mentioned Clinton and LBJ and all the legislation, especially with LBJ, that was accomplished. And now there's so much divisiveness. Going back to Clinton's administration and LBJ, you're talking about pragmatic, very smart people who knew how to get things done versus rank amateurs who are not especially bright, which is the climate we're in now. Or have been in now for, it will be 8 out of...
Look, I don't want to just pick out Democratic administrations. Ronald Reagan got things done. I didn't agree with a lot of his positions, but he got things done bipartisan. Poppy Bush did, right?
Well, Reagan was successful because Tip O'Neill was willing to have the conversation.
Well, it takes two to tango. Certainly, it takes two. And look, I see what goes on in New York. Not going to get all political, but you see what goes on in New York City with this mayoral campaign and stuff. And, can you blame people? Who should I vote for here? The guy who left the governor's mansion in disgrace? Or this other guy who's a Democrat socialist, maybe anti-Semitic to boot, who, you're not giving them a choice. All right, let me vote for the criminal who's in there now anyway, right? That's not a choice for people. This isn't just a Republican issue. The blue states and the Democrats are just as guilty for failing to give people a viable choice.
That's an issue for both parties. I mean, they can't work together. I mean, it's not, you don't blame one side or you blame both sides.
And is it any wonder that no one wants these jobs?
Right.
Let Garima jump in here.
Right. So let's steer this away from political to technological mess, right? So I think from a technology standpoint, I spot two big problems in this. One is the scale, and the other one is sophistication. So we have to tackle both of them, right? And when you look at like all these compliance checklists, HIPAAs of the world and high techs of the world, I think this is a wake up call for them. Try to kind of also bring some money on the table, try to kind of introduce new sophisticated audits, checklist assessments, because the fraud at this scale, if it happened, I mean, technology can be a lever to put the positive side of all this, right? So how do you control the supply chain, for example? What security controls you have in that? Identity access management if somebody is using deepfakes, right? So all this can also bring some kind of positive, revolution or evolution for healthcare in the technology side. And I strongly advocate that somebody needs to look at the audit assessment and the HIPAAs of the world to see how we can improve this in the best of, the technology.
I agree with you, Garima. This is, at the end of the day, a technology issue. This particular, Medicare. There's no reason, and maybe that's what a panel would need to do. Design a better system.
Do not let a good crisis go to waste. Come on.
All right, let's take a break. Let's get off the politics, I promise you. We're back next. We're giddy up GitOps. It's something safe. You're watching TechStrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey folks, we're back, and Alan promised you a political-free discussion, but I think he just lied, but we'll get back to you in a second. Here we are talking about GitOps, and we have this report over on DevOps.com put together by the folks at Octopus Deploy, and it suggests that people are adopting GitOps alongside new platforms, so therefore it's evolutionary, and it's mainly being driven by the rise of things like Kubernetes, and then people are willing to reconsider their software engineering practices. There's also a whole conversation going on around platform engineering, but Garima, what's your take on what's going on here? Is GitOps and platform engineering kind of joined at the hip somehow, or orthogonal to each other? And what makes people actually change their workflows?
Okay, so let's reflect on the findings of the report first. And I was looking at the report. It seems that 660 software development professionals put their views onto this report. 93% said they have adopted GitOps in some way, shape, and form, right? And the majority of that depends on different factors. There is also like an increase in adoption of GitOps. There is a definite kind of rise of interest in the community, and GitOps has helped industry segments to kind of push the needle for reliability, auditability, collaboration, and all those kind of good components which technology can bring forward. Traceability is another one, right? So I think GitOps has come a long way. I wouldn't say that GitOps is a silver bullet, though, because it has its own flaws. If you ask the community, I mean, the open source community is very vocal about things which doesn't work or GitOps doesn't fix, right? So if you think about like large organizations with multiple repositories, siloed environments, there is a lot of challenge in onboarding to such kind of revolutionary change, right? So if you have seen the report, 7% also say that they would stop using GitOps. I think these 7% work for large ecosystem or large enterprises and probably are stifled by the siloed environment and the ecosystem. And there are many environments in like big enterprises, right? So there where I think platform engineering comes as savior. And I also feel that platform engineering will not be a silver bullet, as you say. I mean, it works for big enterprises, to be honest. I mean, platform engineering, if you see like how and who are the takers of this kind of movement, is like big, large enterprises, tier 1 customers, right? So those are people who will be, onboarding to that. And of course, if you think about the challenges which we have spoken about from a GitOps perspective, platform engineering could resolve those challenges in certain extent, and they can bring some advanced tooling, which I can talk a little bit later. I also want other panelists to be contributing to this discussion, so I give it back to Mike, you, and maybe you can come back to me for some more future roadmap items.
Absolutely. Alan, I can't help but wonder sometimes when I look at all this stuff, is this just like fashion trends in software engineering? We just kind of like bounce back and forth between things, and this month, it's wide lapels and thin tots.
I don't want to sound like one of these old fogies who say, "Oh, there's nothing new under the sun." But there is nothing new. No, I'm kidding. There are new things, but look, just a couple words here. First of all, this survey comes to us from Octopus Deploy, the people who acquired CodeFresh, who are the people behind Argo, which is the main GitOps platform, open source platform. And they offer hosted GitOps. So, you got to take the findings, I think, with a bit of a grain of salt. And so I would caution and mention that. Secondly, though, I was at PlatformCon last week in the in-person day in New York City. The virtual event went on all week, and there was an in-person day in London. They used to say about platform engineering, well, once you got your Kubernetes set up, it's all good, right? That was the beginning and the end of platform engineering. But no, it's not just Kubernetes. The big emphasis in platform engineering now is on what we call IDP, right? Internal developer platforms. And you're right, Garima, it's a big company game, right? Because you've got to have enough developers to go develop a platform or use a platform that they're all going to use, so you have some standardization. Now, part of that IDP extends into the DevOps CI/CD tail, if you will, and that's where the GitOps lies. So this is right in the sweet spot for platform engineering. You're using Kubernetes, you got an IDP, why not incorporate GitOps in there as your way to move that along? GitOps has always been closely linked with Kubernetes, with cloud native, right? Because the old CI/CDs, Jenkins, some of the older ones like that, didn't really work with Kubernetes and cloud natively. GitOps did. So I do think, in spite of the obvious bias of the company doing the survey, I think the results pretty much show where the market is. It is being adopted. I think larger organizations that are using IDPs are using GitOps as part of that, and because they increasingly are using a cloud native architecture, microservices, and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, I will actually add to this discussion because whether it is platform engineering or GitOps, there's like I'll start with GitOps. Like, what key challenges which are not addressed by GitOps, and then we can also discuss if they are addressed by platform engineering or not. So, for example, the big challenge which we see from a practitioner's perspective is secrets management. For example, GitOps has been struggling with that inherently, and it doesn't solve that problem of secure secret management, right? So probably this is something which needs to be solved through GitOps community itself, the future roadmap item, and how do you integrate many environments and storing secrets and Git, and making it safe, right? Another main problems when you see the adoption percentage is also related to branching and environment management. So to a certain extent, environment management the problem can be solved by platform engineering, right? But branching strategy is another issue which probably platform engineering will not solve, but probably the community and the teams and the enterprise themselves have to think about a structure, how to create, like, how to not to create an unnecessary complexity in the environment, right? So these are few things and challenges. And if you think about portability or vendor lock-in, maybe platform engineering is a good kind of savior in that context, because probably with GitOps, if this is a concern from the community that it's limiting portability or it's tightly coupling tools, I think platform engineering can also become some kind of change trigger in this. Visibility and auditability, for example, is a big area, because it's not very easy to relate what changes happened when live deployments happen. It's still kind of in the inception stages of bringing that control and traceability with GitOps. So hopefully this will be a future roadmap item in the GitOps community, for example, where we can have an AI assisted GitOps tooling to resolve these kind of problems. And if you remember our last discussion, Ellen, around MCP, right? So the Flux community has come up with an MCP server, for example, which integrates that capability and brings agentic AI into the mix. So that's another area of looking at it from a GitOps perspective. How do you make AI assisted technology more accessible for GitOps, and what kind of ecosystem connections you can make, so we can be more ecosystem centric. We have to have more flexibility in the approach, how we are deploying this into a large ecosystem or large enterprise. I leave you with these points because I think this will also give some indications of the work needed to be done in the community for GitOps.
Alan, we talk about these topics a lot, and there's always a conversation about all the things that need to be improved in the land of software engineering. And yet, every morning I wake up and there's just tons and tons of applications that seem to be deployed and working. So, what, is this just magic? Because if you go to a business executive, he goes, "What problem? The software's running."
Well, you're right. We are generating, whether it be through AI or not, we generate more code and more applications every year than we did the year before by a wide number. No doubt about it. But it's also because software and technology is becoming so much more important and ingrained into almost everything we do. So you need more software. You need more applications. And, we forget the whole idea of writing, software and creating applications is 75 years old, right? It's not that old. And so it's still it's still more art than science, though I think we've made a lot of progress towards science, making it a science, not just an art. It used to be developers basically crafted code and applications in like a vacuum, like an old time craftsman in Europe working on wood or clocks, or Swiss folks making watches. Where now it's much more industrialized. It's much more scalable. It's not that craftsman per se. Hey, we all could be software developers in the world of AI, right? So there's so much riding on our software. Every company's a software company. Software is eating the world. There's so much at stake. Of course, it's continuous improvement, continuous
Look, I
evolvement.
mean, let's also not shy away from the fact that no tool, no platform can save a poorly designed software.
This is true too. Crap in is crap out.
So how much of our software is poorly designed?
A lot
Just out
of
of
it.
curiosity.
A lot of it. And it can always be made better. That's the nature of this beast.
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting better. So here's the good news: we're getting better every day, and we're the science gets better, the best practices get better, and that's that's why we sit here and talk about these things. Otherwise, we'd be talking politics all day.
But if I'm a developer and I perceive myself to be an artisan, am I going to really, emotionally warm up to the notion of science? And we talked about this in previous shows, but who the hell wants to go to work in a factory in the first place?
Well, this is true. This is true. But I think the generation of software developers who think of themselves as artisans.
Look, I would say that, as a software practitioner, I have the left hand side of the brain and the right hand side of the brain, right? So the left hand side of the brain is co-creation with new technology, more creative side of it. And this is, again, community driven collaboration. And right hand side is more systematic, system oriented, system architecture. All this is required as an individual. So I think both sides have to grow together.
Agreed.
My left brain and right brain argue with each other all day long, which is why you find see me mumbling to myself down the hallway.
Yeah, well, but that's what it takes. It takes a whole brain. Anyway, hey, we're over time. I got to end this one. John, Garima, Mike, thanks for joining today. Thank you for watching this episode of TechStrong Gang. We do have a full TechStrong TV schedule immediately following, so stay tuned for that if you're watching this on the live stream. If you're watching this on, TechStrong TV or the YouTube channel or the OTT, thank you for taking time to click in. We appreciate it. As I mentioned, we will not be on Friday, July 4th, for Independence Day here in the U.S. And wherever you are, cherish your freedoms. Enjoy the weekend. And until Monday, then, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong Gang. We're out.